Hello, Joy friends, and welcome to Once Upon a Storybook. My name is Cynthia with Cynthia's Joyful Creations, and today we are going to look at a true story of heavenly guardians from the book In the Arms of Angels by the author Joan Wester Anderson. And today's angel story is titled Welcome to Paradise. The angels came. I saw them there. They took you up the golden stairs. This is from Hope Price from her book of Angels. When Homer Croft returned from his stint in the Marine Corps, he found a job in Albany, Georgia, to be near his mother and his sister Ruth. After his mother died, Ruth and her husband John invited Homer to live with them. Ruth and John were members of the First Free Will Baptist Church of Thomasville, Georgia. One Wednesday night, they invited Homer to accompany them to prayer meeting. "Ruth, do you want the roof to fall in?" Homer asked, only half joking. His life had been somewhat of a struggle so far, and he was not at all sure that the Lord knew who he was. Ruth and John assured him that the roof was sturdy. So just to appease them, Homer went along. "I found the Lord that night," he says, and he impressed the pastor, Reverend Floyd Dalton, too. So much that Homer eventually became an unofficial youth minister for the teenage boys in the church. Reverend Dalton encouraged Homer to share his own difficulties with the boys. Perhaps he'd sense that in doing so, Homer might receive some heavenly healing of his own. People in the church community appreciated this new member and his willingness to take their sons on fishing and camping trips. They also noticed that he had a good singing voice, and it wasn't long before one of them gave Homer the phone number of a young woman in town who played the piano and also loved to sing. It turned out to be a perfect match, just as the onlookers probably expected it to be, and Homer and Denny were married about a year later. As an interesting connection, Denny was a cousin of Homer's brother-in-law, John. She also became the piano player for the church. Shortly after our wedding, Ruth, John, Denny, and I formed a quartet, Homer says. We called ourselves the Kinsmen, due to being related to each other in so many ways, and we sang wherever we were invited all around the tri-state area. We did this simply because we loved the Lord. Homer had also become very close to Pastor Dalton. Even though he eventually was transferred to another church, we never lost touch. He invited us many times to his home for delicious country meals, and this is where I met his mother, who lived in a guest house on their farm. The elder Mrs. Dalton was a warm and endearing woman. Just being in her presence made Homer feel blessed. When he was eventually ordained a minister and assigned to his beloved Free Will Baptist Church, where his spiritual life had begun, no one was happier for him than Mrs. Dalton. John and Ruth relocated to Athens, so Homer and Denny found another couple to join them, and they continued their music ministry as the Joyful Singers. They also trained others to sing in quartets or trios. Even the senior citizens formed a group. "He who sings prays twice," goes the adage, and Homer delighted in sending new teams out to churches in the area. The Dalton family continued to keep in touch even though Mrs. Dalton was now in poor health. Homer often looked back at his life and wondered where he would be if Pastor Dalton had not made him feel so welcome at that first Wednesday night prayer meeting. One Sunday morning, Homer felt led to pray for Mrs. Dalton at his service. That afternoon, the Joyful Singers went to perform at a Church of God congregation, a church much larger than their own. First, the congregation sang, and then the church choir. When it was their turn, Denny went to the piano on the platform, and the other three took their places around her. To their right and below them, the church organist arranged his music. He would also accompany them. It seemed like a fairly routine presentation until the end. We had prepared 4 songs, and the title of the first 3 escaped me, Homer says, but I'll never forget the 4th. It was titled Beautiful. The Joyful Singers got to the last verse of Beautiful and were winding up for their conclusion, and for some reason Homer glanced down at the organist and almost fainted. Lying on the floor next to the organ was the elderly Mrs. Dalton. She looked quiet and peaceful and was wearing a long white gown. But how could she be here? Homer thought wildly. She was ill at home many miles away. His congregation had prayed for her this very morning. Then as he watched, two angels with short blonde hair, huge wings, and long white robes descended through the ceiling of the church and flew down to where Mrs. Dalton lay. I must have stammered in my singing because I was so astonished, Homer says, and yet there was no commotion coming from the organist or congregation. No excited pointing or whispering. Was he the only one who could see these beautiful beings? As Homer stared, spellbound, the angels bent over Mrs. Dalton and gently put their arms under hers. They lifted her as if she were weightless. Then the three flew up and out through the ceiling. At the same moment Beautiful ended and the audience burst into applause. Homer's knees were so weak that he doubted he would be able to leave the platform, but somehow he made it back to the front pew. Denny, he whispered, "Did you see them?" "See who?" "Brother Floyd's mother lying on the floor near the organist. The angels." "What?" Denny shook her head, clearly confused. Homer looked at his watch. Exactly 3 p.m., and he'd probably seen the angels 5 minutes ago. He would phone Brother Floyd Dalton as soon as he got home. There had to be a reasonable explanation for what he'd just witnessed. When Homer made the call, Floyd's daughter answered. "Dad is at my grandmother's house," she told Homer. "She's critically ill, but here is the phone number. He'll be glad to talk with you." A moment later, Homer was speaking to Floyd. "I'm calling about your mother," Homer said. "She has died," the pastor told him sadly. "What time did this happen?" "Just a little before 3. It was the answer Homer had expected. Death is always a loss. But when one is able to assure those remaining that the loved one has gone to heaven, sorrow turns to joy. And so it was for Homer and the Dalton family on that blessed day. "I don't know why I was chosen to see it," Homer says, "but it is only one of the several visions God has shown me. Our little church has many angels in its service, and we are grateful for them all." Oh, what a beautiful story. I actually have goosebumps. I hope you enjoyed that story as well. Well, thank you for joining me for Once Upon a Storybook for this beautiful angel story. I cannot wait to come back next week and join you with yet another angel story. And until then, my friends, be joyful, have a great week, and I will see you in the next video for our continuation of these angel stories. Bye.